of God. And what St. Paul is at great pains to point out is that people seek to establish their own identity through a variety of tactics which are doomed to fail. People seek to establish their own kind of what used to be called self-worth. You know, again, that's another, gag me with a spoon. Self-esteem, we lived through that. It didn't do anything for our children. 10 trillion teachers' conferences on self-esteem, and they still all got arrested. And they still are on drugs. And they still made, quote, poor choices. That's another one that's going to be very superannuated very soon. The word, oh, my child makes poor choices. Yes, duh, in a sense they could be described in one way as a poor choice. But you think your child got up in the morning and chose poorly? The child got up in the morning and was in a whole mix of different things. Wilder says a brilliant thing in his 1935 play Bernice. It's an African-American play. People don't know it. It's an African-American play that starred Ethel Waters. And it was premiered in Berlin because no one would put it on in this country. And at one point, the heroine, called Bernice, played by Ethel Waters, says, "Never make children choose. They don't know what they're choosing. Never put children in the place of choosing. They don't know what it is they're choosing." Now, this runs so countercultural to current thinking, but it's so obvious if you've ever tried to, quote, get children or young people to make, quote, good choices. It doesn't have anything to do with the unconscious. It treats people as if they're rational entities whose reason is somehow linked up properly with their affections. And it's simply not possibly true. Just have a child. All you need to do is have a child. And you'll realize that poor choices, I'm 59, 8. What am I? 8. And poor choices every day, I make 10 trillion of them. And you do too. Well, you don't, but you know somebody who does. Now, what according to this is, the righteousness of God is a way of living which, when you are reconciled with reality, God is simply a word for reality. God, obviously, in a monistic picture of life, is a word for reality, who is speaking to you providentially through everything that happens to you, bad or good. We believe that his character is benign because of Christ, but nonetheless, we are living our lives in the forum of reality. And what we do is, according to Paul, we live by something called law. And law is any way that you summon an identity based upon something that you can control. That's just what law in the Bible is anything that you can do to prop up a sense of identity in some way that you can control. The obvious way is activity. People involve themselves in futile, pointless activity 24/7. Just look at your life. It's a futile, pointless maybe not, but you won't remember it. Why do I say it's pointless and futile? Because when you're dying, you will never remember a carpool. You will never remember a single carpool that you ever did. You will never remember a tax form that you filled out, or if Chevy Chase Village is bearing the power lines. It will never be on your heart when you are dying. What you will remember is something about love, something about guilt, something about your daughter, something about your husband, something about your wife, something about your mother. In battle, when men are being killed in battle, in the old days, it was a common fact that men who were wounded in battle always were calling out for their mothers. It's in Gallipoli, all the accounts of Gallipoli, when all the young English men, all of the young New Zealanders, mostly New Zealanders and Aussies, thousands of them were lying on the beach, dying, thousands of them, right on the spot. And the chaplain, all that he could hear was cries for their mothers. They weren't thinking about anything else but need, love, and connection, if I may use the word. So the world thinks that the righteousness of God, i.e. a reconciled, non-anxious human person, is created by means of what the Bible calls law. Let's look at the different examples. I don't want to be straw men, but they all exist. How well you do in your career. That's obviously a way that people prop up a sense of who they are. And we know that when it comes time to face the deeper issues of life, that has nothing to do with it. I had the most interesting experience the other day. I was reading an obituary from a school that I went to in New York City of a very prominent individual. This is a very, very prominent individual in New York City. And in the alumni magazine of this school, this very well-known person who's recently died, they printed his obituary as it had been written by his son and son-in-law. Wouldn't you know, he wanted to read his obituary because it was going in the New York Times. And he was very, very ill in Sloan Kettering or someplace like that, and he wanted to read his obituary. But his son and son-in-law, and I know the son-in-law, had made great hay out of the social connections of the dying man. That he had been born into some WASP family in New York City and had all the advantages of whatever that means. Now, this high-profile individual, and I can show it to you, it's in our recycling bin now, but in this alumni magazine, this individual crossed out every phrase that drew attention to what the world would have called his so-called social credentials. Instead of saying he was born in such and such 1911 to a prominent New York well-established family, a mercantile family with strong WASP, whatever, he crossed it all out. And it simply said he was born in New York City on such and such a date, 1911, which simply means that even this particular guy who was snowed, he was snowed by that stuff, crossed it out. He was no longer interested. Success, money, connections, who you're married to, trophy wives, trophy husbands, all of that is a form of trying to have righteousness or a reconciled, unaccused identity. What are some other examples? How your children turn out. That would be one. How your children turn out. Let's imagine your children are not turning out so great. Now again, I'm not talking about anyone here, but I have known people, one of whose children was alienated or perhaps had a very high-profile case against them, or had a very low-profile case against them, or had simply broken the mother's heart. If your life were tied to your child's sort of how the child turns out, that would be a form of the law for St. Paul. That would be a way that my contingent identity is dependent on how my kids do. Or if I'm children who will say, "Mom, you're embarrassing me." Teenagers will say, "Don't get near me, you're embarrassing me." Well, because their identity in front of their peers is threatened by their embarrassing mother. Now, this has never happened to you, but I see it all the time. So little children instinctively know that their righteousness has to be somehow connected to some form of how they look. Anybody here who's ever actually thought that how you look is important? I mean, if that thought ever occurred to you, you would be someone who is dealing out of law, because law is the accusing voice. So you use your own examples. There are a million different things. How you, I mean, I can give you, you get the idea. Law is any attempt to prop up a human being by means of something that is controllable, some form of intrinsic or extrinsic attainments. Now, I mean, I just don't, I mean, Mary, you know me, I mean, my head is just spinning right now. It's just spinning with possible examples, but stop. But he says this, and this is where the Christian insight is very important for a life that is broken on stress. Because stress is the modern word for law. If you want to know what law is in the Bible, and I say this without any batting an eye, I'm not at all apologetic to it, it includes the Ten Commandments at its highest pitch, which I believe, by the way, just so you know, I believe the Ten Commandments in full, but in normal life, law is simply stress. Stress is, I feel under some kind of judgment. I feel hassled. I feel uncomfortable with the demands. So whenever you find yourself saying, "I'm feeling real stressed," that is law. And it's usually not a matter of overwork. It's not like having too much to do. its stress has to do with some judgment.